I'm going to start out with something very general that actually could be said of all of your films, but really only actually struck me today. And that is that you rarely move the camera. I think you move it less and less. I think that in Love's Refrain we see some very gentle, very slight, delicate camera movement, but in the more recent films, much less. And yet, you do not favor stationary images. Your films teem with movement. They're full of motion. And it's a very simple, obvious thing to say, and maybe it's very obvious to most people here, but I only really noticed that and I only began to think about that today. And so I wonder if you could talk about motion in your films.
Well, it's funny, I had the same, I was watching Love's Refrain, and I was thinking, oh, maybe I should start moving the camera again. No, I had that exact thought. I don't know what to say. There's something wonderful about moving the camera because it includes your body. Like Jerome's films are very much physical that way. He's maybe more at home physically in the world than I am, and his films have he uses the camera in a way that with a lot of freedom. And I'm always there's always the delicate point when you move the camera to what point do you cause some kind of duality to occur. In other words, how can you move the camera and still have union on the screen? And so I think I slowly got good at that. It's a kind of very subtle kind of movements. In other words, where you don't feel there's a camera person shooting the world, you know. So how can you get the camera to move in a way which really it makes the screen change and metamorphosize? In other words, a good camera movement makes the screen change rather than it's a camera movement. You know, I think I cannot say his name properly. Ho Shou Shen. Yeah. Oh. I've noticed that. I think it was in Goodbye South Goodbye. I loved his camera movements because they weren't camera movements. The frame itself was changing because of the movement. Rather, you know. Do you understand that? So anyway, I don't know if any more to say to that. As I said, I had the same feeling. I said, oh, maybe I should start moving the camera again, you know.
Well, there's a sense for me that in not moving the frame, the camera, you get a heightened sense of the camera receiving something.
Yeah, I think.
And you receiving it through the camera. There's a kind of almost no mediation between your experience of whatever it is that you're filming and what you're filming.
Yes, and also no mediation between the audience and the screen. In other words, by holding it in a certain kind of with a certain kind of a nobility or dignity, you allow the audience to have the same relationship to the screen that I'm having through the camera. So there's a kind of complete union, you know, of audience, screen, camera, object, you know. And I think it's a desire to, you know, sometimes it's only when you're very still with yourself that you feel things that are kind of hidden and that you've been, you know, repressing. Suddenly they come up. So I think the stillness has a little bit to do with just seeing how much, you know, how deeply you can go. You know.
Another contrast that really jumped out at me from going from Love's Refrain to Intimations, and then to Prelude. I had begun to think that there was a phase in your work in the last 10 years where people's faces started to be a lot less frequent. When I think of Triste and and Love's Refrain, there's people's faces appear a lot, and then your films become less populated. There may be human presence, but faces start to disappear. And then they make a big comeback in Intimations. But then in Prelude, not so much.
There they go again. No, I know it's a, well, there's so many things to talk about. One is there are many films made in the world that have human faces in them. Right? Right. It's in other words, it's something very much explored by many filmmakers. So it isn't a missing element in world cinema. I think there's a very delicate thing where at a certain point when you include a person, the film either becomes theatrical, or documentary. And so I'm trying very hard to see how I can include faces and still have it be in the realm of poetry. I'm always haunted. Yes, sometimes can I make a whole film just with faces, with people and so forth. I just find it a very delicate point. Just when it shifts suddenly to theater, then I don't know. I just saw At Land lately, the Maya Deren film, which is very theatrical, but so visual and so poetically strong. I mean, one is always. I'm so love avant-garde films of the 40s and 50s. I love that period when there was a sense of character, the pursuit, the haunted, some character being haunted, or the pursuit of another character. Gregory's films like Swain, and there's so many films. I love those films. There's a certain kind of innocence in them. I'm always tempted in that direction, and I have this feeling when I have to witness all the films I've made for 50 years and 4 days here, that I'm going to go through some kind of shift. I'm going to say, I think something will come out of it. That's,
Could be interesting.
Yeah.
Something else that I felt has been really happening in your films, or I've been experiencing in your films, over the last 5, 6, 7 films, is a kind of a movement towards many images that are what I would call liminal. They're right on the edge of being perceptible, and oftentimes you really aren't sure what you're seeing. Sometimes it becomes a little clearer, and sometimes it doesn't. And Prelude ends with an extraordinary passage of purely liminal images that are on the threshold of not being visible. And I really wanted to ask you about that movement. I don't know how to ask a more specific question, but it's an extraordinary gesture.
Well, I think in the kind of filmmaking I'm involved in, you're trying to subvert language. I mean, obviously, most films are dominated by language, either spoken language or the structure of the cinema is representing very language-based ideas. Like, we're in this valley, these peasants live here, over here is a problem. And now we're going to see if we can resolve the problem by the end of the film, and all that kind of thing. So, so the films have always been trying to do something that film could do, which is to touch the audience directly through the eye, touch the heart, touch the wisdom in people without using language, by actually saying to what degree could cinema become a form of wisdom? Could it be a wisdom form where it actually is directly touching people rather than making them have ideas as such. And so I think that's a little bit what's going on when I go to use the camera. If I'm looking through the camera, and in a subtle way there's a language-based idea, I don't shoot it. Language-based idea means there's that object. There's an object. It has a certain irony, or there's an object, and whatever. So it's trying to when you cut to a new shot, that there's a visual cohesiveness, but that what the object actually is, you don't necessarily know. So I find it exciting when I get my footage back and I don't know what it is. Really, when I've forgotten what it is. Some of the great sequences in these films, I don't remember what they are, what they actually are. And I find that personally entertaining, not to know what's going on, but that what's going on is good.
Do you sometimes find that you've shot something, you've filmed something, and the image is so strong that it overwhelms and has to be rejected from the film? Yeah,
I can think of. I took people. I have friends over, and they look at. They get to see camera footage, and they always get angry because the best shot is not in the film. But like in the film Spring, I had this. Which is, I guess it's playing maybe Thursday or, I took a shot of these, there's a baseball field in the park, and this team was doing some kind of warm-up exercise. I can't even remember what it was, but it was very balancing, because they had made a circle, and somehow how everyone in the circle was like, waving their bats around. It was spring training, and it's a fantastic shot. I mean, really. But I said I can't have a film called Spring and people warming up playing baseball. It just didn't seem.
It seemed wrong.
It seemed wrong. So things like that. Yeah.
In your book,
Yeah.
You talk about the danger of images that can seem like symbols, and that's anathema.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, in Love's Refrain, there's an image that verges on the brink of being a symbol, or it tempts the audience to attribute meaning to it, and that's the plastic container on the from a picnic or something, I guess, on the ground. And I'm not saying that that's a symbolic image, but that would be an example of an image I would think that you would be very wary of using.
It wouldn't be the kind of shot I would take now. It's this 10 years ago. It was a kind of. I was still at that time. I was still interested. If I saw something that was charming in the world, I would photograph it. Because that is sort of like it was like a mouth that was closing. But and now I don't photograph things that are clever in the world. I want to make the cinema itself a reality, the screen itself a reality, rather than showing something clever in the world. I think the one I love most in that film for a symbol is the opening thing with the rowboat is starting to go adrift, and then the rope pull. I thought for Love's Refrain that you're just trying to get away, and but actually the film was named after I made it, so.
They all are, aren't they?
No, actually lately, like Avraham came out from the title, and then when the ones with the months and the seasons. That was just because I don't know, didn't know what else to do, and it seemed fine, Yeah.
Let's get some questions from out there. I'll repeat them if they're semi-audible. Yeah.
So you said you sometimes don't remember having shot any of the things.
Yes.
And I was actually wondering, because of because of how present the attention seems, and how present the images seem,
Yeah.
almost to the point of being outside, kind of feeling outside of time. What role memory plays for you in your shooting? Whether there are places that have certain memories for you, and also in the editing, remembering having shot certain things that day, that experience. Because also the last two titles, I don't know if you meant this, but they called up
Wordsworth?
Wordsworth.
Yes. I was going to say that, yes, they're two Wordsworthian titles. Yeah.
So it's a question about memory and the fact that taking off from Nick's comment that he doesn't always remember or doesn't always know what he shot when he's looking at the footage. What role memory plays in terms of maybe there being places that have associations, or in the cutting room remembering the experience of shooting something?
Well, what I found is that actually that memory is kind of sentiment. There's a sentiment in memory, and the sentiment is very dangerous in filmmaking because you attribute something to the image or to the or to the cut that is based on your personal sentiment somehow, and it's not really there. When you're making a film, it's you have to really. When I have a film, I guess it's playing tomorrow at 3, before Jerome's 2 films, called Hours for Jerome, and I think that has a lot of memory and sentiment in it, you know, and but when you're working on a film, that's why, for instance, if you travel with a camera, and you went to some place you really liked, and you have footage from there, it takes me many projections of that footage before the sentiment of that trip, you know, and I'm imbuing the image with all this things. So, and it takes a while to just get it down to how is it actually functioning visually? Is it, you know? So I think memory is maybe not part of it. Though in a certain way, I could say that on the nonverbal way, when I was a child, when I was, let's say, 5, my mother bought these curtains that had little gold threads in them, you know. And I used to, like, when I was bored and you're 5 years old, 6, like putting my face right up against them and make the blobs, the light go into, blobs of light. Or my childhood friend Mark is here, and we used to put the snow on the black and white television, and then go up to the screen like that. Various decadent kinds of pastimes, and but so I think the films do have a sense of memory, in the sense of, I think they're touching on. Trying to touch on a kind of purity which might come from a much earlier period in your life, almost at the time before you spoke, you know.
We have time for just 1 or 2 more questions. Yes?
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the mesh of shooting and editing in terms of how long you decide to, when shooting or editing, use the word gesture, how long to make the gesture.
Yeah, it's a question about the relationship between shooting and editing and gesture. I mean, the gestures of shooting and then I guess the gestures of editing. But what's that?
The duration. Well, how do you decide the duration of each gesture?
How do you decide the duration of each gesture?
Well, you watch it, right? You watch it and it ripens, right? And then there's a moment when it's done, right? And after that moment that it's done, your mind starts to add thoughts because it's done. But then your mind, and then when you start to overdo it, the moment you start to, your mind starts to do these things.
It starts to kind of attribute meaning.
Yeah, attribute, or and so there are times if you're, for instance, there are times when a shot comes right to ripeness and then you cut. But for instance, there could be a time when if the next shot is very stationary, you don't go up to that point of full ripeness and then cut, or then it's kind of flat. You know, you're up and then you're, but if, let's say the next shot was something moving, then you could go a drop past that point of ripeness, just a drop, and then the release, you know, just as your mind's about to, you know, then the movement is welcomed. If the movement came before that point of ripeness, you would lose the presence, because you would feel that the hand of the editing was driving the film, and it wasn't respecting your actual experience. It's all that kind of very delicate thing. It's a question of really watching and trusting your mind, watching what your mind does as you're watching. You know.
One last question. Anyone? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right, Nick, thank you.